The mine was seconds from collapsing when Kevin Beets struck gold, $100 million worth of it. In one heart-stopping moment, a desperate final dig turned into the richest discovery of his career. Pressure gauges were screaming, the ground trembling underfoot, but Kevin refused to stop. His instincts told him the real pay streak was just inches away, and he was right. Within minutes, the walls exploded with shimmering gold veins, flooding the chamber with light as crews rushed to collect what they could. Buckets overflowed, drills jammed, and alarms blared, but Kevin kept pushing until the last ounce was pulled from the ground. Then came the roar. The supports snapped, rock thundered down, and the lower shaft vanished beneath tons of debris. The team barely escaped, but the gold, nearly 4,000 ounces in total, was already safe above ground. It was a moment of chaos, courage, and pure instinct. Kevin Beets didn't just find gold. He beat time, risk, and nature itself. What should have been a disaster became one of the most jaw-dropping strikes in Yukon history, a discovery so massive it changed everything for the Beets operation. If you love high-stakes discoveries and real gold rush mysteries, hit that like button and subscribe, because what Kevin Beets just uncovered beneath the Yukon might rewrite mining history forever. The morning started like any other on the Beets claim. Machines roaring, diesel fumes thick in the cold Yukon air, but within minutes, the ground told a different story. Kevin's scanner began screaming with density spikes so intense they overloaded the monitor. The data didn't match gold, silver, or anything they'd cataloged before. Whatever lay beneath that abandoned shaft wasn't natural. It was deliberate, structured, and impossibly dense. Tony Beets stood beside the rig, arms crossed, his trademark grin nowhere in sight. "Run it again," he muttered. Kevin did, and the readings came back higher. Beneath a stretch of frozen ground long ignored by miners, there was something enormous, something metallic. Word spread through the camp faster than fire. Some said it was a hidden cache from the first Klondike prospectors. Others whispered about European expeditions that vanished before the gold rush even began. Kevin didn't care about rumors. He wanted proof. By late afternoon, Tony gave the go-ahead for a limited dig. No cameras, no outsiders, only a small crew under Kevin's direct command. As the excavator clawed at the earth, radar screens flashed with clusters of anomalies. Shapes, rectangular, consistent, almost architectural, appeared on the display. Kevin's heart pounded. "This isn't a natural deposit," he said quietly. "It's something built." The first bucket loads of permafrost came out easy. Frozen dirt and gravel, nothing special. But the deeper they went, the stranger it became. The soil turned black and heavy, infused with metallic flecks that shimmered like burnt mercury under the lights. A faint chemical stench began to rise from below, sharp and unnatural. Some of the crew backed off, uneasy. "Could be gas pockets," one muttered. Kevin knew better. He'd smelled something like this once before, when uncovering sealed tunnels on an old dredge site. It meant preservation, intentional sealing. He ordered steel supports driven into the sides, reinforcing the shaft before continuing. The air grew thicker with every meter they dug. Sensors started picking up mild vibrations, micro-tremors hinting that the whole area was under tension, like something was buried under pressure. Then the sound, metal meeting stone. A deep, resonant clang that echoed up the shaft. Kevin froze. The excavator had struck something solid, flat, and heavy. He waved the crew to stop and climbed down himself. Under the floodlights, he brushed away the last layer of soil and revealed it. A massive slab of stone etched with markings no one recognized. Not native carvings, not miners' etchings. These looked engineered. Circular symbols, geometric lines, faint traces of gilding embedded in the cracks. "This isn't gold," Kevin whispered. It's a doorway. Tony's voice came through the radio, rough and skeptical. You're chasing ghosts, boy. Get your readings, then fill it back in. But Kevin wasn't leaving. He could feel it, the hum in the air, the faint magnetic pull under his boots. There was power below. It took hours of careful cutting and stabilization before the slab finally gave way, revealing a hollow cavity beyond. A gust of air escaped, dry, stale, and acidic. The crew flinched at the smell. Kevin steadied his flashlight and stepped closer. The beam revealed the impossible. Timber beams coated in black resin, walls lined with clay to seal out moisture, and beneath them, the glint of metal. At first it looked like old machinery, pipes, rods, strange fittings, but then his light caught something unmistakable. A crate, reinforced with iron, half buried in sediment. Another beside it, and another, 3 in total, stacked like a storage vault. Each was studded with bronze nails and coated with a strange mineral glaze. Kevin crouched, ran his glove across the surface. It was warm, faintly humming. He called for the handheld analyzer, sweeping it across the crate's edge. The screen flickered. Platinum? Silver. Unknown alloy. Kevin frowned. Unknown alloy? He'd never seen that reading before. It wasn't a glitch. The composition was real, something pure, ancient, untouched by modern metallurgy. The others waited for him to speak. He didn't. He just stared, caught between awe and disbelief. Then he reached for his radio. "Dad," he said, voice low and steady, "it's not just gold down here." He paused, staring into the darkness beyond the crates where faint shapes loomed. Armored plates, rods, fragments of something that looked almost ceremonial. "It's something older." Static filled the channel. Tony didn't answer right away. Above ground, machines idled, men whispered, and the Yukon wind carried dust across the pit. The discovery halted everything. Within hours, experts were flown in, floodlights re-angled, and the site sealed. Whatever they had found wasn't supposed to exist, and yet it was there, waiting beneath their feet. When the first geologist arrived, he knelt beside the exposed wall, carefully scraping a thin layer of residue into a vial. "This shouldn't exist," he murmured, studying the reinforced seams running through the rock. The timbers were centuries old, but the bindings looked almost modern. Precise cuts, metal joints crafted with millimeter accuracy. No miner in the 1800s could have done this. When the samples were dated, the results confirmed the impossible. The outer soil was from the 1890s, but the structure itself was far older. Kevin listened in silence as the expert outlined what that meant. Architecture resembling early European designs, Dutch, or even Iberian. A revelation that changed everything they thought they knew about this land. Rumors Kevin had once dismissed as wild talk suddenly carried weight. Old journals from Dawson City had mentioned a Spanish expedition that vanished without a trace decades before the Klondike boom, seeking a mythical, frozen treasury. Kevin's mind raced. Could this be their vault? When the light from his headlamp struck a half-buried object beside the crate, he brushed off the dust and froze. A small metal crest, no larger than his hand, gleamed through centuries of corrosion. A crown flanked by twin swords. The style was unmistakable. Tony Beets' gruff voice came over the radio. "What have you got, Kev?" Kevin hesitated before answering. "Something. Royal." Later, when a local historian arrived under cover of night, she nearly dropped her notebook upon seeing the crest. Her voice trembled as she ran her fingers across the emblem. "That's not mining gear. That's a Templar insignia variation. If this is authentic, you could be standing over one of the richest and most important finds in Canadian history." Her eyes met Kevin's. "Do you understand what this means?" Kevin did, but so did the crew. They could all feel it now. The air inside the chamber wasn't just heavy with dust. It carried the weight of history itself. The historian's estimate put the find's potential worth north of $100 million, even without knowing what the crates held. Kevin tried to hide his excitement behind the dirt on his face, but Tony's voice cut through the static again, sharp and cold. "That shaft's unstable. You're gambling with your life." Kevin stared at the shimmering crest in his hand and whispered, "If I walk away now, I'll never forgive myself." The decision was made. Hours later, the team began clearing debris around the largest crate. It was sealed tight, iron clamps rusted into the resin that held it together. The crew used torches, slowly melting through centuries of mineral buildup. Steam hissed from the seams as the metal finally gave way. Kevin and two others pried the lid open, and the moment the crate cracked, light seemed to bounce off every surface inside. Dozens of gold bars lay stacked like bricks, each hand-stamped, their edges sharp, their glow unnaturally bright. Kevin picked one up, brushing away residue. No mint marks, no serials, just an embossed sigil, a spiral of flames surrounding a cross. He'd seen it once before, in an old mining book referencing pre-Columbian European contact. The gold itself looked alive, reflecting the floodlights with a subtle iridescence, a sheen almost too pure. He ran the analyzer across it, 99.97% purity. Even modern refineries couldn't reach that without industrial equipment. "Dad," Kevin said over the radio, voice unsteady, "you won't believe this. Try me. It's not just gold. It's like it was made for something sacred." Tony was silent for a few seconds before growling, "Pack it up." Quietly, Kevin turned to his men. "No chatter, no leaks. Anyone talks, they're done." He could already sense eyes on them, people guessing something big was happening. The camp had gone too quiet. He ordered the smaller bars melted into standard molds for transport, less recognizable, easier to move. The larger pieces they left intact, placing them on reinforced pallets near the entrance. That's when the first alarm screamed. The seismic sensors lit up red. The data tech shouted over the noise, "We've got movement!" The south wall's shifting. Kevin turned toward the far end of the chamber and saw it. A thin crack slicing through the ceiling, spilling dust like dry snow. "Everyone out," he yelled, even as he sprinted for the pressure monitors. The readings spiked again. 2 microshocks within 30 seconds. The shaft was giving way. The supports groaned under immense pressure, vibrating as if the earth itself were warning them. One beam snapped with a gunshot crack, and a wave of rock dust rolled through the tunnel. The excavator operator scrambled out of his cab just before a chunk of ceiling crashed onto the seat he'd been in seconds earlier. Sparks showered the ground. Tony's voice came through again, furious. "You pull out now, Kevin! That's an order!" But Kevin stood his ground, watching water seep through the upper walls, streaking across the gold crates. "Not yet," he said. "We're too close." The geologist shouted, "You've got 5 minutes before this whole place folds in." "Then we make those 5 minutes count." Kevin grabbed a sledgehammer and started clearing the last barrier near the second crate, ignoring the groaning echo of steel and stone around him. The crew followed, adrenaline overriding fear. Dust filled the air, lights flickered, and the entire floor trembled like a living thing. Tony cursed over the radio, yelling for the loader's topside to prepare for emergency extraction. Kevin didn't respond. His focus was locked on the gold, the markings, the promise that whatever this was, it was more than just money. It was legacy. It was proof of something buried long before the Beets ever came north. Behind him, another crack tore through the wall, spraying pebbles and dirt. The tunnel lights flickered, dimming to a harsh orange. He turned briefly toward the sound, jaw clenched. "We're this close, Dad," he muttered into his mic, voice swallowed by the groaning roar of the collapsing chamber. "If we leave now, it'll be gone forever." With coordinated precision, the the crew pressed on. Shoring beams groaned under strain, ropes creaked, and dust choked the air. But step by careful step, they pushed past the final obstacles. Hours of reinforcement, careful excavation, and unwavering focus brought them to the threshold of the inner vault. The rumble of machinery faded as the last barrier gave way. What lay beyond was unlike anything they had seen. Stone walls carved with near-perfect symmetry, streaked with veins of gold leaf that shimmered under the floodlights. The air felt heavier, older, as though time itself had been compressed within these sealed walls. Every sound echoed with an almost sacred resonance, and for a moment even the danger outside seemed to fade, leaving only the weight and wonder of history unearthed. At the center of the vault sat an enormous chest, far larger than any gold cache Kevin had ever encountered. Its surface was layered with gemstones, some shattered, others glowing faintly beneath a crust of rust and mineral deposits. Bolts the size of Kevin's wrist sealed the lid, and across its front ran intricate engravings, figures in robes, holding torches, surrounding a circle of fire. Kevin and the crew exchanged tense looks. None dared touch it at first. The historian whispered, "It's ritualistic," possibly protective, but Kevin, breathing through his dust mask, grabbed the iron pry bar anyway. When the lid creaked open, the light bounced off something so brilliant it silenced everyone. Inside were stacked layers of fused coins, relics, and thick gold ingots, compressed by centuries of earth. Time had welded everything together into one massive, glittering block. The surface gleamed with colors of old oxidation, deep amber, streaks of green, flashes of platinum white. Kevin reached down carefully and lifted a single coin free from the mass. It bore an emblem, a ship surrounded by radiant suns, on one side, and a Latin inscription on the other, worn but still visible. A portable scanner hummed quietly as it analyzed the surface. The readings stunned everyone. The materials predated any recorded mining in the Yukon by centuries. Carbon dating from the wooden lining placed the chest's construction somewhere around the early 1500s. "That's 300 years before the Klondike Rush," the historian murmured. "This shouldn't exist here." Kevin shone his light across the inner lid, where another inscription ran along a gold-plated strip, "Custodi Thesaurem sub terra ignis." He turned to the historian. "Guard the treasure beneath the fire," she translated softly. The phrase made everyone uneasy. As the historian documented each artifact, the weight of the discovery began to sink in. This wasn't just a lucky strike. It was an archaeological revelation worth tens of millions. Preliminary analysis suggested the total value, if preserved, could exceed $100 million. Among the relics were royal seals engraved with European crests, finely crafted daggers with gemstone hilts, and trade coins bearing markings from Spanish and Dutch colonial roots. Then came the most shocking find, an intact crown fragment, solid gold rimmed with rubies, its design unmistakably medieval European. Kevin stared at it for a long moment before gently setting it on a padded crate. His voice was low, almost reverent. "This changes everything." He called Tony over the radio. "We're not just mining, Dad. We're unearthing history." Tony didn't answer right away. When he finally did, his tone was tight. "Then you'd better keep it quiet. If this gets out, we'll have every camera in the Yukon on our doorstep." But keeping it quiet proved impossible. By nightfall, the first whispers had already spread through the nearby camps. Something about Beets striking a king's fortune. Trucks began lingering near the access road, unfamiliar headlights watching from a distance. Kevin doubled security, posting guards around the shaft and restricting entry to verified crew only. Still, drones appeared overhead by morning. Rival crews wanted a piece of whatever was coming out of that pit. Inside, the situation grew more dangerous by the hour. Floodwater started seeping through the tunnel seams, soaking the gravel floor and shorting out the floodlights. The lower section of the vault filled ankle-deep, then knee-deep, until they were standing in freezing black water. The temperature dropped sharply. Kevin barked orders to speed up the removal process. Smaller pieces of gold and coins were melted on site, cast into 50-pound bars for easier transport. The larger relics were catalogued, photographed, and wrapped in oilcloth before being lifted out by crane. Tony arrived in person before dawn, wearing his signature fur-lined coat, eyes dark with worry. "You've got hours at best," he said, surveying the rising water and buckling supports. Kevin just nodded, wiping mud from his face. "We're not leaving anything behind." Tony didn't argue further. He ordered the loaders and trucks ready, coordinating a makeshift airlift from the nearby plateau. Helicopters would ferry the treasure to a secure hangar before the mine caved in. By midday, the entire operation had become a blur of shouting, grinding engines, and echoing alarms. The structural sensors screamed warnings, vibrations climbing past the safe limit. Cracks began snaking up the stone walls, dust falling like snow. The air grew hot and suffocating as electrical systems overloaded. Kevin's voice boomed through the chaos. "Get the crates out!" Now. One by one, the massive chests were strapped, lifted, and pulled toward the main shaft. The men worked with desperate precision, their movements frantic but controlled. The first helicopter's rotors thundered overhead, rattling the steel frames as cables were latched onto the heaviest containers. The roar of engines drowned out the groaning of the collapsing rock. Kevin stood at the edge of the vault, directing the lifts, watching centuries of history being ripped from the earth. Then came the tremor, deep, resonant, like a heartbeat in the ground. The floor shifted under their boots, throwing several men off balance. Floodwater surged forward, slamming into equipment and knocking over floodlights. Sparks flew, plunging half the chamber into shadow. Kevin grabbed a radio, yelling for an immediate evacuation. The historian screamed over the noise, pointing to the ceiling as fissures widened and whole slabs of stone began to shear away. The alarms wailed louder. Tony's voice cracked through the radio, furious and panicked. "Kevin, you've got to move! It's coming down!" Kevin turned toward the last crate still unlifted, the one that held the crown fragment and the Latin-inscribed lid. He sprinted toward it, grabbing the side rail as the ground heaved again. "Not without it!" he shouted, straining as water poured in around his legs. The loader operator reversed the machine into position, cable hooks snapping into place just as another tremor rippled through the shaft. The sound was deafening, metal screaming, rock splitting, the earth itself roaring in protest. Kevin ducked as a support beam tore loose and crashed beside him, spraying gravel and sparks. But he didn't stop. The crate rose slowly, swinging under the lift cable, dripping water and gold dust. Above them, the tunnel mouth flickered with daylight and rotor wash. The entire mine was trembling like a living creature on the brink of collapse, but Kevin's focus stayed locked on that crate until it vanished into the light. "Go!" he yelled, signaling the last of his crew toward the exit. They scrambled up the flooded ramp as boulders began raining down behind them. The tremor swelled into a deafening roar, the ground lurching beneath Kevin's boots. He didn't look away. One last glance into the golden darkness below, where the chest had rested for centuries, confirmed what he already feared. The vault was coming down. Steel supports twisted, catwalks groaned, and dust exploded from fissures in the walls. Kevin sprinted toward the access shaft, helmet light flickering through the choking clouds of debris. Behind him, the chamber folded in on itself in a catastrophic cascade of stone and metal, swallowing machinery, tools, and decades of history. He dove through the passage just as a wall of rock slammed shut, sealing an entire world of gold, relics, and legend forever beneath the Yukon earth. Outside, chaos reigned. The ground split open in jagged fractures, swallowing equipment as generators exploded one by one. Floodlights flickered out, leaving only the red glow of emergency beacons cutting through the haze. Men coughed and stumbled through the dirt, shouting names that went unanswered. The main power lines snapped overhead, showering sparks across the camp as smoke poured from the collapsed entry shaft. When the dust began to settle, Kevin stood motionless, covered in soot and grime, his eyes locked on the crater that had consumed the vault. The lower levels were gone, swallowed whole. Yet scattered across the surface lay several massive crates, their iron frames cracked but intact. They managed to recover roughly 70% of the treasure. Dozens of gold bars, ornate relics, and gem-encrusted artifacts pulled from the edge of the collapse. The air reeked of ozone and oil. No one spoke. Kevin simply stared into the darkness where the tunnel had been, knowing that beneath that rubble still lay the rest, millions in unclaimed gold and history lost to the earth. Tony arrived moments later by helicopter, boots sinking into the mud as he surveyed the wreckage. His voice, calm but sharp, cut through the chaos. "Get what's left loaded. Nothing stays here by morning." The remaining crates were moved to the staging area under blackout conditions. Security was doubled. Drones were grounded. Every man was searched for recording devices before being allowed near the operation. Under Tony's direct orders, the convoy rolled out by nightfall. 5 armored trucks, escorted by 2 helicopters, running low and silent through the Yukon wilderness. Each crate bore only a single marking: K. Beets, Project 7. No manifests, no documentation. Just an internal code that meant nothing to anyone but the Beets family. At the edge of the airstrip outside Dawson, floodlights blinked on for mere minutes before cutting out again. A private jet waited on standby, engines humming softly under the low clouds. Witnesses later claimed they saw armed personnel, possibly military, surrounding the tarmac as the trucks offloaded their cargo. The crates were moved directly into the jet's cargo hold, covered with tarps, then sealed shut under Tony's supervision. No customs forms, no local authorities. Within the hour, the plane lifted off into the storm, heading south with no filed flight plan. The sound of its engines faded into the night, leaving behind nothing but wind and the distant hiss of rain hitting the scorched earth. For the next several days, silence. The site was cordoned off under a flood hazard notice issued by territorial officials. Within a week, geologists from the Department of Natural Resources arrived, drilling core samples and installing concrete seals over the collapsed shaft. The official statement labeled it an environmental containment procedure. But locals knew better. Rumors spread fast across Dawson's taverns and mining camps. Talk of a secret airlift, of gold bars unlike anything from any known mint, of markings that matched ancient European insignia. Kevin, meanwhile, appeared only once before the media, giving a short interview. His tone was subdued, almost detached. "Just another day on the claim," he said with a half-smile. But those who'd worked beside him noticed something different. A quiet distance in his eyes, as if part of him had been buried with the treasure below. When asked about the collapse, he brushed it off. "The Yukon takes what it wants." Tony's response came later, during a rare appearance at a mining conference in Fairbanks. When pressed about the find, he simply laughed. The kind of deep, knowing laugh that said more than any answer could. "Let's just say," he told the reporter, "my boy found what everyone's been looking for. Some things are better off where they are." In the weeks that followed, online forums lit up with theories. Some claimed the crest on the chest tied back to Templar expeditions rumored to have reached North America centuries before Columbus. Others insisted it was royal gold, possibly from a lost Dutch treasury smuggled west during the 1600s. A few went even further, suggesting extraterrestrial origins or hidden alliances between Old World families and early Yukon settlers. None of it could be proven, but every rumor added fuel to the legend. Satellite images showed the Beets claims sealed under layers of reinforced concrete. No new permits were filed, no further excavation allowed. Still, Faint heat signatures appeared sporadically on thermal scans. Some said it was geological activity. Others believed it was something else moving beneath the ground. In Dawson, the whispers continued. Old-timers swore they'd seen trucks with no license plates passing through at dawn, carrying unmarked cargo toward the Alaskan border. One prospector claimed he found fragments of melted gold downstream, pure beyond refinery standard. Another said he'd spotted Kevin alone near the sealed shaft weeks after the incident, just standing there, staring at the ground as if listening for something beneath. Whatever was recovered that night vanished without record. No banks listed deposits, no museums displayed relics, no government registry acknowledged the find. Yet somehow, whispers of sudden wealth began circling northern investment firms, and a few quiet shipments moved through private channels in Vancouver. Untraceable, insured under shell names. The official story remained unchanged. The collapse had rendered the site inaccessible. The operation shut down for safety reasons. But locals still talk about the Beets claim like a buried empire waiting to breathe again. Beneath the fire-scorched soil, under tons of rock and twisted metal, they say the rest of the treasure still lies, untouched, waiting for whoever dares to take it back. And though Kevin Beets no longer speaks of it, those who know him best believe he remembers every inch of that vault, every symbol on those chests, and every word etched in Latin under the lid, Custodi Thesaurem, sub terra ignis. Guard the treasure beneath the fire. Somewhere in the Yukon, the earth still hums faintly where the chamber once stood. Whether it's shifting rock or something older stirring below, no one can say. But one thing remains certain. Whatever Kevin uncovered down there didn't just rewrite Yukon history. It buried it again, deeper than before.